person you loved most in the world has gone, and you are going to experience all these really extreme emotions, and you're going to be absolutely shattered by it. People think they are going crazy. They don't understand what is happening to them. We are literally the club that nobody wants to be part of.
Welcome to Death, a Changing Industry. Today we had the great pleasure to speak with Emma Kneebone, who is the Deputy CEO and Head of Bereavement Services for the charity To Wish. So Emma, a huge thank you for being with us today, and a big welcome to you.
Thank you.
So I've got lots of questions for you today, which I'm really excited to learn about yourself and To Wish. With that then, what do you do in a nutshell? So
To Wish exists to support anybody affected by sudden and unexpected death in children and young people aged 25 and under. It might be worthwhile actually kind of just taking us back a little bit to how we started really. In terms of 2012, my boss, who remains our CEO and is our founder, Rhiannon Manning, was at home with her 3 children. They were 3, 2 and 1 at the time. It was just a normal weekday evening, and the older 2 were having kind of a bath, and I'd just had a bath and were watching a bit of telly before bed, having warm milk, and the little one, little George, was crawling around, or trying to crawl around on the floor. He was just turned 1. Husband Paul upstairs, and Rhea was in the kitchen just clearing up after dinner. She looked over and she saw that little George had fallen backwards. She was unconcerned at that point. He was trying to crawl and not doing it particularly successfully. She went to approach him to put him back upright, and as she did so, he started to seizure. As any parent would, she panicked. She called for her husband. They dialed 999 immediately. There had been no cough, no cold, no temperature, nothing to indicate that he was poorly. And within 4 hours of having made that call to 999, George was declared dead, and they still had no idea why at this point. She talks about how incredible the doctors and nurses were when they were trying to save his life, but when he had been declared dead, it was like no one quite knew what to do, which process to follow, where to put them, how to do it. Because of that, it meant that one of the nurses was carrying little George's body down the main corridor of the hospital, trying to find somewhere appropriate for them to say their goodbyes. Wow. They found somewhere. It was cramped, it was dark, there was coffee cups, Disney stickers on the wall. They stayed with George for a little while. They walked back through the doors of A&E and went home. The 2-year-old and 3-year-old still in bed, none the wiser. George's vomit from a few hours before still on the carpet, and his first birthday cards from a few days earlier on the windowsill. Wow. And they were just, in Rhee's words, they were just kind of left to get on with it. Family and friends rallied around. My absolute local community was incredible, as is often, in these situations. Rhea and Paul dealt with it very differently in the days following George's death, whereas Rhea was very much like, we have to get through this, we have to be okay and pull together as a family. The dialogue in Paul's head was different. It was, it's my fault, I should have been able to save him as dad. It should have been me, not him. And as a result, he walked out of the family home 5 days after George's death. And he never came home again because he'd taken his own life. Wow. So Rhea had lost not only her 1-year-old, her youngest son, but also her husband within the space of 5 days. And still nobody came. There was still no support service in place to even say the basic things of what you're experiencing and what you're feeling is completely normal. This is what's going to happen next, etc. And so what happened following that was pretty incredible. So the 6 months following the boys' deaths, Rhea and the local community fundraised £25,000. And she took that money to the local hospital in South Wales and said, right, here's your money, I want a bereavement room. So that anybody that loses somebody they love of any age has somewhere appropriate to go and say their goodbyes. Unfortunately, the hospital felt that there weren't enough deaths in the hospital at that point to warrant a bereavement room. And so she felt dejected. She took that money to the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff. They took her money, and that was where our first bereavement room was actually set up in 2014. Significantly, what she did at that point, though, was that she went one step further and started speaking to the A&E and critical care teams of UHW to ask them about what happens following a sudden death, or a paediatric sudden death, so up to the age of 18 at this point. And they basically said that they signpost to organisations when they can, but there's no kind of real process in place. And actually, as professionals, they find it really difficult because they see families for the worst snapshot of their life, give them the worst news of their life, and then say goodbye and never see them again, and never get to find out what the next chapter is or what happens to these families. To cut a long story short, Ree and the A&E and critical care teams cleared through clinical governance and immediate support pathway, and that was basically the offer of a memory box, immediate support, so first contact within 24 to 48 hours, and the offer of later down the line counselling. They delivered a pilot between 2014 to 2015 of all the paediatric deaths that came in through the doors of A&E, and that really was the beginning of TWISH. 2016, we started offering our support service to professionals officially, so that they could also access services following, the sudden death of a child or young person.
Yep.
And we also upped the age to 25. We realised that we were missing quite a few deaths by perhaps suicide or road traffic accidents or homicides. And that 25 and under was, there's still somebody's child. No matter what age somebody is, it's worth noting that no matter what age you are still somebody's child. But we were missing that kind of 19 to 25 young person age group, so we upped the age to 25. 2018 was really significant for us as an organisation. April 2018, we were listed in the PRUDIC, which in Wales, that's a procedural response to unexpected death in childhood, and it's an all Wales document. And we were listed as the only referral organisation in that document to refer families to following a sudden and unexpected death. And that document was updated earlier this year, and we remain the only organisation in that document.
We've spoken again about, in times of bereavement and grief and that sudden loss,
yes,
it's just the chaos, isn't it? And we spoke before again about giving people control, and the professionals that are involved in dealing with people when someone dies, especially a young person, they need support as well. It's not their fault.
Absolutely.
I had a case here a few months ago where a young family of parents came in on a Saturday afternoon with their baby in their arms to me, who died, and the hospital weren't sure how to handle it in the right way.
Yeah.
So they just brought their baby out of the hospital and brought the baby straight here.
Yeah.
And again, unfortunately, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
So again, I have to be reactive. I hate being reactive.
Yes.
I'll be reactive, but it's about how to be proactive.
Absolutely.
And having the tools, the vehicles, and all the sort of material in place, the platform in place for when these things happen.
Absolutely.
Like I said, the hospital who said that there's not enough of these deaths to warrant it. It's just shocking because it's just one or two.
Absolutely.
That should be enough.
Absolutely, yeah. And we know it's more than that, and that's the sad fact, and that people do really struggle. And actually, I think so much of the conversation around grief and loss and death, dying and bereavement is about coming back to we are human. We are all just human, no matter what job we do. And how how much we necessarily interact with child death. That there's these. It's almost like we need to give bereaved people back their control. They need to have their safety. Particularly when they've been affected by a sudden death. It's like I always say that the alarm clock went off in the morning. They got up and they thought it was going to be a completely normal day. Yeah. And by the end of it, the families we support, they've lost their child. And there is nothing worse, is there? We are literally the club that nobody wants to be part of. Yeah. And so when you are part of our club, it's about making sure that we do everything to empower the people that we're supporting and to give them back an element of control and making their own decisions. And what you were saying actually earlier before this podcast about the person that has died remains theirs. There's so many other processes that happen and people that need to be involved for various reasons. But actually, you probably give those people a huge gift by saying they are still your mum, they are still your sister, whatever it is.
And it's then how you demonstrate that, and actually they're not just words. How you actually prove that is the key.
Yes.
So for Rianne, who went through what she did, like you say, within 4 hours, her world has gone literally upside down. Yeah. There's no control at all. No. So it's about showing her you know, despite there's a huge change here.
Yeah.
He's still yours. He's
Absolutely.
still yours, and for the dad as well.
Yeah.
For the tools there for him as well, which just weren't there.
Absolutely, and you know, in things like communication. So if you say you're going to do something, do it.
Yeah.
Understanding and being able to advocate on behalf of family. So things like, particularly in the days and weeks following, if you give a piece of advice or information to a bereaved family member, they're probably not going to be able to retain it.
Yeah.
Like literally, they won't be able to retain it. So the people around you supporting you, write it down or tell them where it is, or remind them. Or, you know, advocate and do things on behalf of them to make them feel less vulnerable, to make them feel
reinforce the message.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and also for, you know, going back to the professionals, it's about having a human response, because actually, if you've got somebody that is too clinical or not able to show that human element when they are giving the worst news, perhaps, or when they are going through a professional procedure with you, it doesn't help the bereaved. They want somebody, you know, they want people that are compassionate and empathetic and hopefully
they care.
Absolutely, yeah, completely. And then they can trust you, and that's how that's how you build trust.
Yeah.
One of the many elements of how you build trust, and that's what you need, because the rug has been pulled from under you. You need people you can trust.
So that's a wonderful point then to move on to the actual service that you provide. What tools do you give then to help with what we've talked about?
Yeah, so I think what we are all about in Tuish is that immediate support. So there's two elements to what we do. It's kind of the immediate support and then everything that builds that community. So the immediate support for us is about giving them the tool of information and the tool of communication, the tool of guiding them, basically hand-holding through those initial hours, then days, then weeks, and then months. And being able to, I think, if I'm really honest, in those initial weeks is showing people that they will get through this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just go, I'm going to die now. I'm done.
Yeah.
I can't survive this. And so helping them, guiding them through things like the Prudit process in Wales, or the CDOP in England, or how to register a death, or putting them in touch with the local funeral director, or having a conversation with the police officers, because the police have come in and taken the stuff, the laptops, the phones, etc., and they can't remember what the police said or why they've got the stuff, or having a conversation with the hospital because they want to go back and speak to the doctor or the nurse and better understand what care was given. We are the almost essential point to all of those people to be able to go, right, this is what needs to happen, this is what you need to do, or this is how we can help you in this, and guiding them through it. We are also the emotional support to go in and say, I know it's horrific, I know it's absolutely horrific, but what you feel right now is also really normal.
Yeah.
You know, it's the person you loved most in the world has gone, and you are going to experience all these really extreme emotions, and you're going to be absolutely shattered by it. And devastated, and all of those really big, scary words.
But you will survive.
But you will survive, and it is normal. It's a natural reaction.
Yeah.
And people think they are going crazy. They don't understand what is happening to them. And so having somebody sitting there with a cup of tea or whatever's in front of them, caring, showing compassion, showing empathy, and saying, it's okay, you will get through this, and I'm right here, building that trust, building that, showing that good communication, making people feel safe at every opportunity, giving them that control. That is what that immediate support is about. Everything else that we do is about building communities. There's things like the counselling, we've got Beautiful Respite House, there's support groups, there's focus groups, there's monthly events. As I mentioned earlier, we are literally the club that nobody wants to be part of, but when you are, you kind of need other people that get it, that have an idea of what you're going through, that you can relate to.
That tribe we talked about
exactly,
again.
The tribe, the tribe of people that just get it. I actually always talk about a monthly event that I went to. It really sticks in my mind. It was in 2019. It was a beautiful summer's day, and we had a lovely lady who wanted to do something for the charity. And she kindly put on a 3-course meal for some of our bereaved mums. And it was in her garden. It was a beautiful house, beautiful home that she had. It was a gorgeous summer's day, and she put on a bit of gin tasting as well. So I went along and worked the event, and the reason it stays with me is because the mums that attended had a lovely 3-course meal, and then at the end of the day, there were 2 groups. One had had a bit too much gin and they were laughing and they were turning the volume up on the music and they were dancing. And the other group was sat away from the other group of mums in a circle, all sat down, all crying, all telling each other their stories. And what was so lovely about it is that both groups completely accepted the other.
Yeah.
There was no judgment. There was no kind of, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. You should be over it. You shouldn't be talking, whatever. There was none of that. It was completely, in that moment, those ones wanted to dance and have fun and be raucous. And this group wanted to tell each other their stories and cry.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I summarize all the other stuff that we do, which is about building that community and that tribe.
Yeah.
And no one wants to be part of our tribe.
Well, I disagree actually. You don't want to be the situation of why you're there. The circumstances of being there are very unfortunate and it's difficult and sad. But actually, because I say this from my point of view, the deeper I get into what I've been doing, sometimes the more lonely you can feel.
That's true.
So it's about,
Yeah.
you find your people,
Yes.
and they say, don't they, that you have two lives, and the second life begins when you realise you have one life.
Yes.
Which sort of I think is very important. It's fascinating work. It's incredible work. I'm really interested in you though, because you said right at the start you saw the job adverts and it sort of appealed to you.
Yeah.
But I would say that this is more than a job to you.
Absolutely.
What has been your personal driving force behind this? What is your pull? What is your, this investment that you have? It's like your heart, your soul is invested.
Yeah.
What's the reasons behind that?
My family and my story, I suppose, or our story actually, as it is. To take back a little bit, so mum and dad. My mum's Scottish, my dad's Cornish, and dad grew up in a little fishing village called Maldon. I'm still lucky enough to go back there quite often. And mum was on a summer holiday in Maldon with her family. Mum was 15, dad was 17. He was stood outside the front of a pub with a pint. She walked past. He said, "All right, gorgeous." And that was it. They were together.
Smooth.
Yeah, really smooth, yeah. And then 1921, they got married. My mum was 23, so 2 years later they had my sister, Claire. 2 years after that came Alan, my brother. And then 6 years after that came me, the mistake baby. But apparently the best mistake they ever made. It's always that kind of caveat after. And we grew up as a family of 5. Having the older brother and sister was almost like having a second set of parents. Yeah. But they were kind of the cool parents. One Saturday morning, 17th of November 2001, and I was in the local coffee shop. I was working as a waitress, and my dad came in, and my dad's a very gentle man, and hello darling, is what he would normally be like with me. And he came in, he said, "Get your stuff, you're coming with me." And I was 16, so my immediate thought was, oh, what have I done? Yeah. And I told my boss, I said, "I'm so sorry, my dad's here, he's told me I've got to go, and I'm so sorry." She said, "Don't worry, just get your stuff." And she said, "If you can, just let me know what's going on." Yeah. So I got in the car, and my dad was driving like a maniac, to the point where there was something in my brain, and I just said, "Dad, who is it?" And he said, "It's Alan." And that was it. He didn't say another word, and I didn't say another word, because I wanted to get home safe. Yeah. And we arrived, 5-10 minute journey if that, and we arrived home, and my mum was stood outside the house, and my dad had obviously already spoken to her. She said, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't know." And he says, "Get inside." So we walk into the house, and Dad shuts the front door. He puts one arm around me and one arm around my mum, and he just literally says, "Alan's been murdered." Mm. And I remember so clearly thinking, does murdered mean he's alive? I couldn't compute what the word meant, because it was so out of my everyday. Yeah. But I obviously did know what it meant, because I didn't realise it at the time, but I'd actually fallen to the floor and I was screaming. And my mum had stumbled into the next room, into the lounge, and had done exactly the same, to the point where 2 of our neighbours contacted the police because they thought there was a domestic violence incident happening in our home. Wow. And that was literally the second my dad said those words, everything changed. Yeah. Everything. It was words like stabbed and murdered and post-mortem and mortuary, and trial and police. And my sister still didn't know. So my mum rang my now brother-in-law, but at the time was 6 months boyfriend and girlfriend, and just started living together. And thankfully Andy picked up the phone, and my mum just said, "Andy, it's Maureen, Alan's been murdered and I need to tell Claire, so I'm going to call you back in 30 seconds and I need you to answer the phone and just be with her." And so my mum rang back, my sister answered the phone, and she told her that Alan had been murdered. And then my uncle came round, and it's chaos, and you just kind of think, why is my uncle here? Somebody must have contacted him. And he actually drove us up to Wakefield, and we went to the mortuary, and we saw Alan, and I kissed his cheek and I held his hand and I told him I loved him. And then we went to the place, and I still don't really know why, but we went to the place where he was killed, and I collapsed again because it was just a back street.
That location, did you get there straight away?
Yeah.
As in, so like almost too soon?
Too soon, yeah. I think so.
But again, you're just doing what you think is right.
Yeah, exactly.
Stumbling through it as best you can.
And you kind of, I can't even remember, I was 16 at the time, I can't remember why we went to the mortuary at that point. Like, I don't know who gave us the time, I don't know who said, right, we'll go to the mortuary and then we'll go to the place where he died and then we'll go and see the police. I don't know who gave us that information. I don't even know if my mum and dad would. We went and met the police, and actually we met our family liaison officer, Claire Forder. She was the first person actually in that whole day that just made me feel safe.
Yeah.
And she was
calmness.
Calm, and she was kind,
yeah.
And she just said to me, "Hi darling, what's your name?" And I said, "I'm Emma." She said, "Hi Emma, I'm Claire. Would you like a hot chocolate?" I said, "Yes please." She said, "Come on in, come with me."
Being human, isn't it? Just
absolutely.
Being together, being present, being there.
And I'm 22 years on, and I remember her face, and I remember her kind of coming down to my level so clearly, and I remember what she said.
Yeah.
And actually I go out and deliver training to family liaison officers across Wales and now across England, and I always thank them for what they do, because she made a huge difference to me on that day. And then that was kind of the beginning of everything, and to kind of give some context really to what had actually happened. Alan had started studying at Wakefield College. He had started dating a very nice girl in his course. The ex-boyfriend, who was 17, was jealous and had, unknown to us, had stalked Alan for a couple of weeks. And then on the night that Alan died, he stormed into the bar where Alan and this girlfriend were and said, "Next time I see you, you're dead, I'm gonna get you." He was chucked out. He went off and found 2 knives, and he waited for 4 hours with the 2 knives on a very cold November evening for Alan to come out. It's like everybody kind of stumbles out at 2 a.m. And he went up to him with these 2 knives and attempted to stab him 7 times, 3 of which penetrated the skin, and the fatal one went straight through his heart. And he had about 30 seconds before he collapsed, and then he never regained consciousness. And that was it. It was so pointless, and it just...
Complete waste.
Complete waste.
Complete waste.
Yeah.
Can I ask as well then, from what you experienced and what you're doing now, is it also helping your family as well with what you're doing? Is it like healing you all to a certain way, or is it helping what happened?
I hope so. I think when you've been bereaved, particularly suddenly, particularly traumatically, you really kind of question everything. And what is the point? Why am I here? And so actually you need there to be a point. You need to put some good in the world. You need to make a difference in some way. And going back again to that tribe, I think that is something that really connects us all, people that have been bereaved of somebody that we love so much in such a sudden way. We need to kind of counteract it in some way and put some good into the world and make a difference so that actually there's a point to us all being here. And I think that's what this work does. I like to think that it helps us all in some way. I know it helps me. I know it helps me, because I really wish that this service had been available when we lost Alan, and there wasn't a service like this at all. That's why, family liaison officer Claire Forder, that I remember so clearly, because she felt like our support, but she's an investigating officer. It wasn't for her to support our family.
With the work that you've done and the things that you've learned, going back to the 16-year-old Emma, who was on the floor crying and screaming that day. If you could go back now and give her some advice and talk to her, what would you say to her?
It's a really good question.
If you could go back to that moment, to that girl on the floor crying, what would you tell her?
I would hug her so tight, and I would tell her that everything that she experiences is normal, and that the panic attacks and the anxiety and all the other stuff that is going to come as a result of the next few months and years and is normal and is your body's natural reaction. Nobody ever told me that. Nobody ever told me that all the stuff I was experiencing was normal, and that my own body was protecting me with the kind of the anxiety and the fight or flight, etc. I didn't know that. I thought I was, and we hear that all the time now, I thought I was going nuts. Yeah. And it took a trauma counsellor who diagnosed mild PTSD for me to tell me about the scientific explanation of what I was experiencing. And that helped me massively.
And how long did that take you from his death to that point? How long was that?
Probably about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I thought it might be. And
yeah.
You've gone 4 or 5 years with confusion.
Yes.
Stumbling through life. Yes. And like you say, to have that initial conversation, direction,
absolutely,
calmness, guidance, and that's what you do.
Yeah, and everything, you know, those initial, trying to explain to somebody what those initial days and weeks and months are like is just so difficult to do. You know, people talk about a death kind of explodes within the family, but I don't think it does. I think it implodes, because it felt for us, we were this family unit of 5, and one of our family members left or was killed, and it imploded, and we all kind of retreated to our separate corners, and it took us years to be able to come back together as a family of 4. We are a family of 5 and always will be, but to on this earth,
realign,
to be able to form as a family of 4 and know how to do that. You know, Alan was the connection between my sister and I for many years because he was the middle child. Yeah. I adore my sister now, but it took us, and I always have done, you know, that's not nobody that used to get on, but it's taken us years to become a family with 2 sisters. Yeah. 2 siblings, you know, I have 1 sibling on this earth now.
Yeah, it's about your identity, isn't it?
Yes.
As a family.
Yes,
and that's
absolutely, yeah, you've nailed it.
Forming a new identity.
Yes.
Which is difficult.
And that everybody, you know, everybody reacts to grief differently. We know that. We all experience it. So there's the natural cycle of, you know, there's a natural cycle of life. So we always talk about when you're a child, a pet might die, and then perhaps you get older and you have a grandparent die, and then when you are a fully formed adult and beyond, your parent might die, and then at some point you will die. And that, I'm not taking away from any of those experiences, because I still remember losing my first guinea pig, you know, and being distraught by it, and the same with grandparents, and I'm lucky to still have my parents. And although those experiences are horrific and difficult, there is a natural way that we can process them, because it's the natural cycle of life. When something happens that is against that, we rally against it as humans because we just can't process it. Yeah. And so to have 4 people that then have to deal with such a traumatic death of somebody that was so young, and such a pointless death, meant that our experiences of grief were hugely different. For my dad, for example, he, which is very common in men, he used alcohol. He could easily down a bottle of whiskey. Never ever violent, but would sit in his chair. He just wanted to switch his brain off. Like, he just wanted to stop thinking. So we drink whiskey.
It's disbelief.
Absolutely,
denial.
yes.
This isn't happening.
Yep.
But it's not actually allowing you to face the issues either, which is always my observation.
For Mum, it was kind of like this physical reaction. She came out in like an all body, she'd have to have like oilating baths, because it was just like a physical kind of rash almost. Yeah. That it was, and they said it's just the reaction to grief. Yeah. And for me, I wanted to get out of the house. I was 16. I was like, this isn't fun, you know. Yeah. The kind of escaping reality type thing. And so everybody, when they experience grief, no matter what your age and your experience of life, they experience that grief and that loss in different ways. So you're experiencing that own horrificness in yourself, and then you have to try and fully then come back together as a family, and it takes a really long time.
Yeah, well, it takes a long time to find yourself So,
Yeah.
and then the identity of the family as well as your own identity, and then that unit around you as well. Thank you for being so honest, and talking about that experience with such clarity.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that alone can help people. So when they go through this, there is that hope.
I hope so. And you know, looking 22 years on now, and Alan's anniversary is next week, and I still miss him. There's still milestones. You know, even 22 years on, there's still this milestone is that this year he will have been dead for as long as he was alive.
Yeah.
That's really difficult, but it's about, you know, a lot, and you're able to control your grief. That's what happens, is you're able to control your grief a lot more as it kind of goes along, as the time passes. But I think that's another thing in terms of, it's not a point where you just get over it. And so to remind people, you know, that actually there are still anniversaries, there are still birthdays, there are still things that you need to take time to remember them over. And
I keep saying this, and it's a common thread throughout this podcast, that when someone dies, it's not the end. And like these aren't just words to sort of reassure people, to make them feel better. It's the facts. Physically, Alan left.
yeah,
And he left under tragic circumstances, but love and emotion and feelings, they can't stop.
yeah,
That's the facts. That's the facts.
absolutely. And for me, when I'm having a really hard week at work, whatever it might be, what is my bottom line is that in my head, this to wish is Ree's boy's legacy, and that's absolute. But in terms of why I do what I do, it's to keep Alan's name alive. The passion is there for me because of my own experience.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you mentioned as well the training that you provide.
Yes.
Could you go into more depth about what that actually looks like?
Yeah, and so there's two types of training that we mainly do at Swish. So the first one is kind of raising awareness at every opportunity. So we're all about trying to make sure that everybody knows about us, and hopefully will never need us, but that if they ever do, they know exactly where we are, type thing. The other side of what we do is that we provide training to professional sectors who deal with child sudden death, but also to anybody who wants to be able to support and be comfortable with supporting people who are suddenly bereaved.
Have some tools.
Yes, we would talk about that. Family liaison officer training, for example, we do quite a lot of, and that is going in to talk about the death message, or to talk about that first interaction with the families, to talk about the impact that they don't realise that they have, and how many years later, like I'm talking about Claire Forder, who's retired now, but 22 years later, I still think of her most days.
You'll always remember her, won't you?
Absolutely, and the impact that she had on one of my families is invaluable, and I can never thank her enough. Being able to go and have that conversation with somebody who's just signed up to be a family liaison officer is really powerful, because they are going to have huge impact on the families they support. So there's that kind of aspect of making it better, and we do that with input from those with lived experience, and the families that we have also supported, so that we can go back into hospitals, or we can go back into police forces, or we can go back into coroner's offices and say, you did this brilliantly. This is something that families would really like us to pass on, in terms of they don't want this to happen to anybody else. And that's not in any way, shape or form blaming anybody or putting fault. You know, we do it in a way that is collaborative, and we open discussions, because even as a professional, I can come away from a day at work and go, oh, I could have done that better, or I could have said that in a different way. And you're constantly learning, because we are human, we are going to make mistakes. I think so much of grief and the awkwardness that surrounds grief and supporting people who are grieving is that grief is such an emotional response, and often quite an erratic emotional, or can be perceived as an erratic emotional response, because even the bereaved person often doesn't know what they're going to be feeling from 1 hour to the next. So as a British society, where we want everything to not be too overly emotional, we find that really difficult to deal with. So the other side of what we deliver in terms of training is that we're quite bold in our conversations, and we're talking about things about how can you as an individual, no matter what your line of work is, feel more confident, so increasing confidence around supporting bereaved people, and acceptance that you're not always going to get it right, but actually doing something or saying something is always going to be better than doing nothing.
Yeah, crossing the road.
Crossing the road and not saying a word.
Isn't the solution.
Absolutely, we were talking about that earlier. You know, the amount of times that 15, 20-year friendships have gone in a moment because somebody didn't say, I'm so sorry for your loss, or acknowledge it, or say hello in the street, or whatever it might be.
No, that's really important to say that on this podcast. So we're saying that 15, 20-year relationships, close friendships will end in seconds.
Yeah.
Because that friend is too scared to have a conversation, to say the wrong thing. So instead they'll say nothing at all, they'll cross the road, and it's done.
Absolutely. But the moment they've done that, the moment that they have crossed the road and said nothing, that they are absolutely berating themselves and can't believe they've done that and feel terrible. You know, it's not about getting at the person that feels like...
Of course not.
It's just, they just were panicked. They were so panicked.
So instead, you know, if we can give those people the tools...
Yes.
And instead of crossing the road, they can just say, listen, I'm not sure what to say to you, but I'm here for you.
Yeah.
I'll bring some food to your house tomorrow night.
Absolutely.
I'm there for you. I'm present. I'm here.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the world is a kinder, more compassionate place. And the thought of that excites me. Really
excites me. And isn't that what we all just need? A little bit more of a kinder world.
Yeah.
Looking out for each other. And that, you know, we're talking about grief. We're talking about something that we are all going to experience. Whenever I go into a room, no matter who I am speaking to, if it's about having that discussion around supporting suddenly bereaved, there are generally two groups of people, and there are generally the people that either are part of the tribe and have experienced it, so know what they needed or what helped them, or who are naturally empathetic, compassionate, givers, caretakers, etc. And then you have this other group of people that are awkward and don't really know what to do, and will be the person that walks past in the street. And they are not bad people.
Of course, that's important.
They are just, they are just kind of uncomfortable with something that is uncomfortable. You know, it's that acceptance, and it's about building that confidence. And if you identify as somebody in that group of people where you think you might be somebody that would walk past or would panic, or have never had to deal with a suddenly bereaved person, or know that your character is not naturally empathetic and not naturally compassionate, because we're all very different, and that's a good thing in the big scheme of things, then actually creating a toolkit for yourself, even if it is, when I am with somebody that I know is bereaved, I am going to say the words, I am so sorry for your loss. You know, like preparing beforehand, putting a plan of action. What can I do that will show them that I care? I'm going to send a card, or I'm going to go and speak, whatever it is, do the work around it. So that when it happens, because it's gonna happen to us all, you know that you can delve into that toolkit and do something that makes that person feel less vulnerable at the most vulnerable point in their lives. And that's what it's all about, and that shows kindness. And that's what eventually will, you know, bring us all together. And if we could all just do that,
better world.
It would make a better world.
And with children then, their involvements, what tools do you provide? You work with adults and knowing how to sort of communicate with children.
Yeah.
What communication techniques can we use for children to help them and assist them? What do you think? So
we would approach it differently in Wish depending on the age and depending on the relationship to the person who has died. First of all is straight talking, in terms of not saying that somebody has gone to sleep, and the language you use around kind of death and dying. Because you could actually say somebody's gone to sleep, and then somebody's then scared to go to sleep because they think they're going to die. So about having honest conversations, and we speak to a lot of individuals who are like, I don't know how to tell my children that my child has died, and how we kind of guide them through that in terms of being honest and preparing that moment, because the children likely will remember that for the rest of their lives, depending on their age. A lot of what we do for the young ones is about having conversations with parents to work out, is it that you're concerned about the child, or and therefore we will put in support in place, whether that's play therapy, young person counselling, whatever it might be, or is it that the child is having a perfectly natural reaction because they've lost somebody they love, and you're, as an adult, there's so much going on in your world, you're just a little bit unsure about how to deal with it, and so understandably you're very worried about your other child or children. So there's a conversation there that we have that's really direct with parents quite a lot of the time, in terms of, let's identify what the issues are.
What is the situation? What
exactly.
is the picture?
Yeah.
Who needs that initial conversation, initial support?
And is it, quite often we do something called the parent support pathway, where we'll actually have some sessions with a play therapist with the parents, so that they feel better equipped with their toolkit to then be able to go on and parent their child in a way that helps their relationship ultimately. But particularly with sudden and unexpected death, where it's that lack of control, it's the feeling of isolation. So giving them control, asking them what they want, how they want to be involved.
Their voice matters.
Of course it does.
That's the key, isn't it? You're being listened to.
Yeah.
And those words alone.
Absolutely.
We can just sit here, I'm here, I'm present, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And that, again, I think is very powerful.
Absolutely.
You sometimes don't need to have words, just being present.
Yes.
Being there for them.
And explaining, and I was thinking when you said that then, my mum and dad did that really, really well. So throughout the whole, the weeks and months following Alan's death, the one thing that, many things, but the one thing that mum and dad always said to Claire and I was, we make the decisions as a four, and if one of us isn't happy, we come together as a four and we'll discuss it. And we knew that, I knew that from day one. So when it came to Alan's celebration, as we called it, I hated the fact that that the coffin was going to be taken in and there would be no one with him. So my sister and I went down and followed the coffin in the church and stayed with him until everybody started to arrive. That to me was super important, and my mum and my dad and my sister made sure that happened. And it's something that, as an adult, I am looking back on that going, I'm so thankful they gave me that choice and they gave me that autonomy around how to grieve my brother.
It was time for you as well.
Hugely important.
Just out of curiosity, was that just you and your sister who went with your brother?
Yeah.
So there's just the three of you.
Yeah.
In that venue.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And beautiful. The flip side of that, I remember my mum's funeral. We went to church the night before for Roman Catholic mass, and the reception. Traditionally, you take the coffin into church the night before, and the church was full. It was absolutely full, and it's still.
How do you feel about that?
It makes me feel it's a missed opportunity again.
Yeah.
To have some control and to have some time with my mum. Yeah. So now again, with arranging funerals, I'm always mindful. I don't go over the top, but I'm mindful to, make sure people have these connection points with their loved one. So it's what they need.
Yeah.
So again, I'm so pleased for you, because I know how powerful those moments are.
Absolutely.
To who you are today, almost.
Yeah.
Fascinating. What other points during Alan's death and funeral did you do? What other things did you do which have helped you since then?
All the decisions that were made around his funeral, we did as a family. We had a lovely funeral director who said, what do you want him to be dressed in? Yeah. Do you want us to do his hair? We were like, no, we'll do his hair. Like, his hair was a thing. Yeah. So my sister did his hair. We were able to play, he was a singer-songwriter, we were able to play his music in the church. His friends were so loving with us as a family, and even now I'm still in contact with some of his friends. Okay. People really showed support for us, and I think that it's a sense of community.
As well.
It's huge, because it's just the most isolating, lonely experience.
So Tuish, what is its future? Where do you go next from here?
Well, it's a really exciting time at Tuish at the moment. What I spoke about earlier, we spoke about the Prudic, and that in 2018 we became this all Wales organisation, and from there we'd had many a conversation about where do we go next. Do we up the age in Wales? We're a homegrown charity. Rhi is Welsh. We're really proud that we started in Wales. So we did a really big scoping exercise to look actually what exists in England, because if we weren't needed, if there were already excellent organisations out there delivering the work, then we would stay in Wales. Yeah. Why would we, repeat that?
There's no need.
Exactly. Yeah. And what we found was that there are pockets of excellent support out there, really are. But it's very much a postcode lottery. Yeah. and it's very much dependent on the kind of cause of death or where you live or how you can access it.
Again, inconsistent.
Absolutely. And so we knew that there was nothing that kind of covered all sudden and unexpected death, children, young people aged 25 and under, but we wanted to very much approach it like we did we do in Wales, where we link in with other organisations, because there are, for example, if there's an organisation that has this excellent counselling service, fine, we'll come in and we'll do the memory boxes and that immediate support, and we will hand over to you. Let's work together. Nobody's got endless finances, nobody's got endless resources. It comes back to building that kind of community, doesn't it? So we knew that we wanted to expand into England, and we are now at a point where we are about to do what we are calling phase 1, of which there are 10 or 11 phases. England, as you can imagine, is much bigger than Wales, so we're approaching it very strategically. So in the next few weeks we'll be delivering our service in Cheshire, Shropshire, Worcestershire, Herefordshire, Gloucestershire, Somerset and Avon, which is all the kind of border counties of England and Wales. And we've been getting the message out there over the last few months, and hopefully this side of Christmas we'll be delivering our service. I now know that if we were to lose Alan today, to wish would have been offered to my family, and that is huge. It feels like a full circle moment. I would drop all of that in a second to have another time with Alan, but actually you've got to get something good's got to come out of it.
It's the fulfillment long term, the people that will be where you were will now receive better service and better care. The
commitment we make to our families from day one is you can pick us up and you can put us down throughout the years, but we will always be there.
Fantastic. And just, a huge well done to you. And as I say, I think it's really exciting where you're heading. And I'm certain that Alan would be looking at the work you're doing and just be very proud of his sister. So
I hope so.
Huge well done to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
A huge thank you for watching our podcast, Death, A Changing Industry. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel as we have some fascinating guests lined up. Thank you so much.